Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. It's 2:30 and welcome along to today's Rushcliffe Borough Council Planning Committee meeting. I'm Councillor Richard Butler, the Chairman of the committee. May I remind everyone that the meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. In addition, under the Local Authorities Executive Arrangements, Meeting and Access to Information England Regulations 2012, other people may film, record, tweet or blog from this meeting. The use of any such images or sound recordings is not under the Council's control. May I remind councillors to please switch your microphones off when you are not speaking, and also actually remind you to switch them on when you are speaking, because I know sometimes we don't always remember that. So please use the microphones appropriately. So thank you for that. So other councillors with us today, we have councillors Adair, Bailey, Healy, Mason, Murray, Price, Walker and Way. And officers from the council are Mr. Ashcroft, who is the Planning Services Consultant, Mr. Cook, who is the Interim Planning Operations Manager, Mr. Hilton, who is Senior Planning Officer, and and then we have Mrs. Dennis. Do you know, I can't read my writing. Mrs. Dennis, who's the solicitor, Mrs. Richardson, who is the Democratic Services Officer, and we are going to be joined later by Mrs. Dunn and Mr. Sharman, who are also Principal Planning Officers. They'll be joining us a little bit later on. So welcome everybody, and first item on the agenda is apologies for absence, please.
We have apologies from councillors Maureen Stockwood, Councillor Clark, Councillor Thomas, Councillor Bansal and Councillor Purdue-Horan, and substituting today we have Councillor Upton, Councillor Adair, Councillor Way and Councillor Murray.
Thank you very much, and welcome to the substitutes. Hope you enjoy the meeting and find it interesting and look forward to contributions. And item 2 is the declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest under A, under the Code of Conduct, and or B, under the Planning Code? Anything to declare? Oh, Councillor Bailey.
The fourth application is within my ward, and that is the former Islamic Institute in Home Gardens, Flintham. So I'll sit out that one. Thank you.
And Councillor Upton.
Yes, same report, item 4. There may be a slight conflict of interest in that I'm presenting a cabinet report on that site next Tuesday evening, and so I don't think I'll participate in that debate, and I'll probably abstain, just to be clear on that one.
Thank you. Yes, I think that's probably the appropriate thing to do. So thank you for that. So we go into item 3, which are minutes of there's 2 previous meetings. So item 3 is the meeting held on the 28th of July. And for those of us present, are you happy that these are correct and happy for me to sign them? Thank you. So I'll just sign those. And then we also had the meeting on the 11th of August. So again, for those of us who were here, are we happy with those? Thank you. So those are the signed minutes. Right, so we now go into the main items of today's meeting, which are our planning applications. So if I just get onto the right page here. So the first application this afternoon is Chestnut Farm, Chestnut Lane, Barton of Fabis. This is an application for matters reserved under application reference 19-00412/outline for approval of access, appearance, landscaping and layout and scale for demolition of existing buildings and construction of a residential scheme for 3 dwellings. And so, Mr. Hilton, you're talking us through this. So over to you, please.
Thank you, Chairman. So members are advised that there are late representations which have been circulated.
Actually, could I just confirm, have members received and seen the late representations we've had on this and other items? I should have asked that a moment ago, so we have, yes. Sorry to interrupt you, I just wanted to make sure we've all got them.
So the application seeks outline planning permission. The outline planning permission was granted in 2019 with all matters reserved for residential scheme of up to 5 dwellings. The reserve matters application seeks erection of 3 dwellings and associated access. So the application site relates to an area to the northeast of Barton in Favis, comprising a storage yard, goods yard for a grounds maintenance company. Comprises predominantly of hard standing. The plan you can see in front of you shows a barn in the centre of the site that's now been removed, and another smaller barn to the northeast corner, which has also been removed since this aerial photo. The site falls within the green belt. There are residential properties to the south, on the opposite side of the road to the west, and then to the north, immediately adjacent to the site, there are a series of converted agricultural buildings which house the grounds maintenance company's offices and also storage. And then this plan just shows the application sites outlined in red, and then in blue is the wider area also falling within the applicant's ownership. So I'm just going to run through some photos of the site. So this is a photo looking along Chestnut Lane towards the application site, the entrance on the right-hand side. And this is a view into the existing entrance into the site, which will serve the residential development. And so this existing access will be used, but upgraded to width of 4.8 metres to serve their site. This is a view of the converted buildings along the northern edge of the site, which house the grounds maintenance company's offices and storage. These buildings actually fall out of the reserve matters application site. And then, view north-east across the site, a view back towards the north of the site. And then we're looking across to the end of this run of buildings and a recently approved building, again in connection with the grounds maintenance company. And then this photo shows a drive which runs from the top of the site, looping around to Chestnut Lane, so it provides a second access to the site at present. And then this is the general view looking north-east towards the open countryside. View looking east again, and this is just a view across the eastern boundary with the open countryside to the right. And then this is just a view from the eastern boundary again, looking across the open countryside. So this is a view looking southeast. You can see in the far right-hand corner is a outbuilding associated with the old forge. And then again, southeast corner of the site, you can see there's an adjacent agricultural building in the distance, which has been recently reclad in a new facing material, but is separate to the application site and a separate consideration to the current proposal. And then this is a view of the rear boundary of the old forge, and you can just see the top of the outbuilding to the rear of that property. This is the southern boundary of the site. So you can see there's a fairly sizable hedgerow which screens the neighbouring properties at the forge and fronting onto Chestnut Lane. And then this is the neighbouring property at number 8, Chestnut Lane. And then another view of that neighbouring property and just the site access on your right-hand side. So looking at the site plan, as you can see, we've got the proposal to use existing access to serve the residential development, comprising 3 detached 2-storey dwellings, and a second access is proposed to serve the adjacent commercial use to the north, which is to be retained but falling outside of the current application site. And just another point is along the southern boundary, you can see there's a section of hedgerow to be retained, but then an additional hedgerow to be planted to provide screening from the neighbour at number 8. And just a point I wanted to clarify on those plans is that amendments have taken place during the course of the application. Original plan proposed the garage between plots 2 and 3 on the right hand side. The garage there was shifted further east, so that's been pulled back from the eastern boundary. Rear projecting patios to the rear of those 2 properties have also been reduced in depth, and the properties have also been pulled back slightly from that eastern boundary to keep that open and free from development. It's got the elevation plans. So this is plot 1. All 3 dwellings are of a similar built form. Due to the flood risk, they have an elevated finished floor level, which is roughly indicated by the sort of brick course that you can see running across the bottom of the property. As a result, the first floor is partly within the roof space to try and limit the overall height. At outline stage, we did set a stipulation for the maximum ridge height, and so the reserve matters plans have to comply with that. And that ridge height was set at approximately the height of the neighbouring properties on Chestnut Lane to ensure that the development would be proportionate in height to the surrounding buildings. And there's a view of the rear of plot 1, floor plan for that property. So in terms of just going back to the floor plan for plot 1, you can see the windows are to be obscure glazed on the southern elevation facing the neighbouring properties, and that's the ground floor and first floor windows to ensure neighbouring privacy. Same will apply to the dwelling on plot 3. Okay. That's the first floor plan. And then elevation plans for plot 2. And this is the garage sited between plots 2 and 3, which was reduced in scale to a single garage during the course of the application, like I say, pulled away from the eastern boundary. Elevation plans for plot 3. And as you can see, the bottom, if you go back to that plan, the bottom drawing there shows a series of windows. Like I say, they'll all be obscure glazed in that southern elevation again. And then the floor plans for that property. So like I say, the principle of a residential development in this location was established at outline stage, although obviously it was all matters reserved. There was an emphasis at outline stage of trying to pull the development away from that eastern boundary to try and keep it within the built area of the village, to maintain a degree of openness and to sort of soften the boundary with the adjacent open countryside. So the reserved matters application is it's a view of officers that it has followed this approach by stepping back the properties on plots 2 to have sort of generous gardens and keep that open area. So although 5 properties were approved at, or up to 5 properties were approved at outline stage, revised or the reserve matters application proposes 3 dwellings, although they are larger in footprint. However, despite the larger footprint, officers are of the view that it would continue to constitute limited infill within the built area as an exception to inappropriate development in the greenbelt. Like I touched on before, although the floor levels are substantially raised, the design is such that the first floor has been partly incorporated into the roof to try and bring down the overall height of the buildings and the wall height. So in terms of relationship with the neighbour to the south at 8 Chestnut Lane, you can probably just about see on this plan there is a 45-degree line of sight that's been indicated, showing the line of sight from the rear windows of that neighbour, And as you can see, plot 1 would not encroach upon that. Plots 1 and 3 are to the north of the neighbouring properties, and therefore any direct shadowing will be very limited due to their orientation. In terms of relationship with the old forge, which is to the sort of southeast corner of the proposal, the property at the old forge actually fronts onto New Road or New Lane, and it has a sizable garden of around about 45 metres in depth. Given the length of the garden, it's the officer's view, it's the view of officers that there would not be an undue overbearing impact on that neighbour. There is a rear outbuilding to the rear of the old forge, but that has a blank elevation facing the application site, and there is a generous, approximately 3 metre high hedge, and there is a condition proposed to retain the hedge on the southern boundary and to protect that by the way of tree protection measures should members be minded to recommend approval. So the property at the old forge to the south is identified as a non-designated heritage asset. However, given the separation distance from the application site and given the relationship, that the key point really is the interrelationship between the old forge and its outbuilding rather than the old forge and the application site. And therefore it is the view of officers that the proposal would not result in harm to the setting of the old forge as a heritage asset. So although the outline application indicates the courtyard style arrangement, and this has a more conventional layout of 3 detached dwellings, it's noted that there are other similar backland developments in the area. For example, at the Limes on Browns Road in the village, and therefore it's not considered that the built form would be out of keeping with the surrounding area. It is of a fairly traditional design on the frontages, more contemporary on the rear with large areas glazing, but the frontage of plot 1, for example, facing the street would be of a fairly traditional design, and therefore it's not considered it would unduly harm the character of the street scene and potentially represent a betterment of the current service yard, which is used for the storage of vehicles and materials. And therefore, the application is in front of you with a recommendation to grant planning permission subject to the conditions set out.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hilton. Now we have 3 guest speakers for this item, and the first speaker is Mr. Jamie Foote, who is going to speak on behalf of the applicant. If you've not been before, the way it works is you have up to 5 minutes to address the committee. If you're still speaking after 4.5 minutes, we'll tell you there's 30 seconds left, and then that is it. It is possible that members of the committee might ask for any points of clarification, but it doesn't turn into a two-way debate. But that doesn't form part of your 5 minutes. So as soon as you're ready, press the right button and the red light will come on and the clock will start. Okay.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I welcome the officer's recommendation for approval of this application. The proposals before you take a reduced format from that originally proposed of the 5 dwellings at an outline stage. We have sought to address all concerns raised through the application, and we also have worked proactively with the council in addressing any concerns that have come forward. I recognise the long-standing objection that is sat with this application from the ward councillor. That relates to both the outline scheme and now the reserve matters. All issues that have been raised, we have gone through bit by bit, one by one, and addressed, as Mr. Hilton is well aware. The proposals are brought into the site now on that eastern boundary. That is fully in line with where the outline scheme was identified. We've also sought to give a better, less dense and monolithic form to what was originally identified. So any views that are distant, albeit, but seen from the lane, looking back into the site, you would now have a broken facades on that rear elevation to plots 2 and 3. And again, you have broken ridge heights, as you've seen from the plans that were before you just a moment ago. In terms of what we've gone through, we've sought to address the heights of the building and make sure they're all low enough. We have footprints that, whilst cumulatively aren't larger, the individual dwellings as they sit are larger than that was identified at an indicative stage. The existing hedgerow to the south will be retained, and there will be no overlooking from the proposed plots 2 and 3 into the dwellings that neighbour it. They are a very good distance away from the proposed units, and we have also said that we would put obscurity to the glazing on those south elevations. Now, my immediate thoughts are you can't just go and obscure a load of windows on the south elevation, but those are secondary windows and they principally serve such areas as bathrooms, en suites. The proposals are in full compliance with the policies of the local plan and your residential design guidance, your SPD. We have addressed the 45-degree rule and the 25-degree rule throughout the application, and we've sought to show where we can, how we meet fully with all the guidance and the policies that are in place. We have no objections from the EA, the LLFA, the highways, and ultimately we have a policy compliant and scheme that I would hope would be welcomed by the council in this location. I therefore would welcome a councillor to put this forward for approval. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Foote. Well within your 5 minutes. Do any members have any points of clarification to ask? No? Sorry, yes, Councillor Bailey.
I wasn't sure whether the gentleman was saying it was a southeastern elevation with the obscured windows, or the southwestern.
Councillor, that's the south elevation looking directly back. I'm sure the slide could be brought up and they could be identified. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So no other points. So, right, thank you, Mr. Foote. So our next speaker on this is speaking to object to the application. This is Mr. Ben Hunt. And again, you've got up to 5 minutes to you've got to, yes.
So, good afternoon. My name's Ben Hunt. I'm a chartered town planner, and thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of Mrs. Angela Plowright, who lives at the Old Forge immediately to the south of the application site. And I'd like to highlight to you today 3 main areas of objection. Firstly, overlooking and overbearing. The house on plot 3 is positioned close to the southern boundary of the site, with the house running along the entire width of my client's rear garden, including a large gable end facing towards my client's house and 6 windows facing south. The buildings are raised up, as you've heard, because the floor levels need to be 1.45 metres, that's almost 5 feet above existing ground levels. To avoid overlooking and loss of privacy, Mr. Hilton has sought changes from the applicant, recommended a condition requiring these windows to be obscure glazed and permanently fixed shut, along with the rear patio areas to be surrounded by a privacy screen. And whilst my client acknowledges these efforts regarding privacy, the result will be unacceptable in other respects. First of all, it will be overbearing because of its size and proximity to my client's rear garden, 1.7 metres away at maximum from the boundary line. It would have an odd, contrived appearance, overly reliant on obscure glazing, contrary to the council's own design guide, with these windows still visible even over the existing hedge. It would not provide a good standard of amenity to new residents, particularly as the 4th bedroom and office would be relying heavily on an obscure glazed window for their outlook. The second area of concern is around hedges and trees. Mr. Hilton recognises that the hedgerow cannot be relied on to provide adequate screening in the long term. And my client agrees with this because the hedge will need to be cut back heavily to provide space for the new house. It's approximately 1.7 metres overhanging from the boundary on the northern side. And the construction of foundations, digging trenches for drainage next to the kitchen, toilets and utility on that side of the building, these will come very close to the hedge. There will be a lack of light to the foliage on the northern side once the house is built. And these things will almost inevitably damage the hedge in our view, which provides the main visual screen for my client's garden. And we think that a root protection zone of just 50 centimetres will not prevent this damage. My client has further concerns about the potential impact on mature, fine apple trees in her garden, and the submitted arboricultural assessment we don't believe has addressed this risk. The Council's policies seek to protect trees and hedgerows as environmental assets, but this development does not ensure their future in our view. The third area of concern is design and layout, and the following are comments from the Council's own monitoring and implementation officer, comparing the outline to this Reserve Matters application. And with reference to Mr. Hilton's report, which I think you'll have in front of you, paragraph 21, the officer says the illustrative master plan had a more rural character due to its enclosed form around a yard. Paragraph 22 goes on to say the reduced number of larger buildings has resulted in scales and massing which is less well related to the existing dwellings nearby than the loose courtyard arrangement of the outline application. And on a slightly different point, the officer also says, whilst dormers are not a common feature of the village, their use is reasonable here given the need to raise ground floor levels, yet keep the overall heights as low as possible. These issues raised by Council's own advisor on that last point, I disagree with Mr. Hilton's conclusion that this is acceptable. We feel this is putting large floor space ahead of good design. So in conclusion, these three main areas of concern are interlinked. The Reserve Matters scheme has an overbearing relationship to my client's garden, has excessive use of obscure glazing, is likely to damage a mature hedgerow and risk the future of mature trees on my client's property, seeks to maximise dwelling size at the expense of amenity, and is trying to squeeze large houses into a suburban backland layout rather than create a genuinely sympathetic infill scheme. We feel that this does not fully respect the character and appearance of this rural village location and is not as high quality design as the approach which was used to justify the outline permission. The scheme needs to be rethought in terms of scale and layout, with more modest houses moved further away from the southern boundary of the site. And until this has happened, members are respectfully asked to refuse the application for approval of Reserve Matters, and failing that, members are asked to defer a decision on the application pending a visit to both the application site and my client's property to more fully appreciate the effects of the scheme. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Hunt. And do any members have any points of clarification for Mr. Hunt? No. Okay. Well, we got off on that one then. So thank you very much. And our final speaker on this, or guest speaker on this item, is the ward member, Councillor Rex Walker. So whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, Chair, fellow councillors. First, I wish to record that I have visited Mrs. Plowright's garden and fully support the objections put forward today on her behalf. In addition to these, I invite you to consider other material planning considerations arising from the significant changes made between the granting of outline planning permission and the proposals before you today. Those members who sat on the committee when the outline permission for the site was granted will recall lively and robust debate regarding whether the indicative scheme could constitute limited infill at this greenbelt location. In determining that it could, significant weight was given to the courtyard style proposals deemed to be in keeping with the deep agricultural context and a 20 to 24 metre green buffer between the built form and the eastern boundary of the site, adjacent to open countryside. Both elements are gone. Not only that, but the layout is now of a backland style with plots 2 and 3 sitting behind plot 1. You have seen 2 houses sat behind one at the front, the result of which is that I have significant difficulty recognising these proposals as either limited infill or good design. Turning briefly to each of the factors, Barton in Favours is a rural village with deep agricultural history. As the name of the application site suggests, this location is a significant part of that history. The large modern detached dwellings are not in keeping with this, and there appears to have been zero attempt in design terms to reflect the history and surrounding area. This is contrary to Policy 10 of Part 1 of the local plan and Policy 11 of Part 2. I respectfully submit that the assertion at para 36 of the report that there are comparable examples of backland development in the village to be incorrect or unhelpful. Entirely within the built-up fabric of the village, not on the boundary. The dwellings at the end of Chestnut Lane replaced previous cottages. On this point, you don't just have to take my word for it. In dismissing an appeal against refusal of permission for a detached building on this side of Chestnut Lane, the inspector, Mrs. Bailey, said, "There are no other dwellings to the rear of the line of properties on Chestnut Lane. The settlement form is of dwellings facing inwards onto narrow lanes and large garden areas and paddocks extending out into the surrounding countryside. The proposed layout would turn the characteristic village pattern of linear frontages at right angles away from the main street. Therefore, I consider it would create a backland layout and would be harmful to the character of the surrounding area. This refers to a different application on an adjacent site at a different time. This is recognised. However, the geography and the pattern of the development in the village has not changed. Neither have the greenbelt considerations, a most helpful precedent. The proposed development no longer has a 20 to 24 metre buffer to the eastern side, which was used previously to demonstrate and justify limited infilling. It's helpful to understand why this is, as well as the ramifications. The applicant's application site is now noticeably smaller than the outline site, with the land at the north now to be retained by the applicant. This decision, by choice, makes the development site smaller. There is less room to play with. The drawings show a setback of 16.3 metres to the rear elevations. I don't understand why this measurement fails to include the raised decks, also built form. This reduces the distance by a further metre. The plot 2 measurement has been taken from the newer paddock fence rather than the original hedgeline boundary, reducing the actual distance by a further 2 metres. So we end up with a proposal now with a buffer just under half the distance as indicated at outline. It is not clear where the proposed septic tanks will be located, presumably in the reduced rear gardens, resulting in yet further intrusion. This matters as a significant breach of the major safeguards against intrusion into the countryside set by this committee. It also matters because of the impact on amenity. Policy 12 of the of Local Plan Part 2 states that development should not be unduly prominent from locations outside the settlement. These substantial dwellings, let's not forget, raised up for flood preventions, will stick out like a sore thumb when viewed from Bridleway 1, a well-used and loved local path into the surrounding countryside. We often hear at these meetings that it's a question of assessing what your heart and your head tells you. You have plenty on which to hang your hat here. Loss of privacy, scale and dominance, layout and density, character of area, and inappropriate development in the greenbelt. These are, of course, matters of judgment. And in closing, I would refer you to paragraph 3 of the report, referring to minor changes made through the course of the application, which is considered to result in a, quote, more acceptable scheme. This isn't too much of a step from determining it to be a less unacceptable scheme. And I invite you to make that short hop this afternoon.
Thank you, Councillor Walker, for that. So we've heard from the person speaking on behalf of the applicant and 2 people objecting, basically looking at issues such as overbearing, out of keeping, queries about the hedges and impact on amenity, both of existing and potential future. And also the difference between outline spacing and this application. So do you want to come back on any of those points, please, Mr. Hilton?
Thank you, Chairman. So firstly, in terms of the hedges referred to on the southern boundary and the concerns raised there, there is a condition relating to hedgerow protection which is proposed. So although an arboricultural report was submitted at outline stage, which indicated the root protection areas for the various hedges, trees on the boundaries of the site, we would be seeking a full plan as part of a discharge of conditions should it be recommended approval. So that point has not yet been finalised. That said, the hedge itself is not protected it's not visible from the public realm especially, and I have considered in the report the eventuality that should the hedge be lost, whether the proposal is still acceptable or not. So that has been a consideration. We can't rely on hedgerow screening alone should it die off in the future, despite the good intentions to retain it. So like I said, that is one of the reasons why obscure glazing was requested in the southern elevation of plots 1 and 3 was that the hedgerow screening alone wasn't considered sufficient to prevent any potential loss of privacy in the future. And similarly, that's why we're looking at a condition for privacy screen on the raised terraces of plots 1 and 3 accordingly, because that would provide screening should the hedge be lost. In terms of design, like I touched on before, it's not a courtyard design, but it is felt they are well spaced properties, and I would say a lower density of 3 dwellings rather than 5. The courtyard arrangement that was indicated at outline stage, when you look at the plans in more detail, the indicative plans, effectively it forms a 2-storey barrier along the running north to south, which obscures views across the site into the open countryside, whereas the current arrangement with the dwellings on plots 1 and 3 being detached dwellings provides a bit more of a view through the site to the open countryside. And really, I just want to emphasise that we have been in discussions during the course of the application and have worked proactively with the applicant and agent, and various amendments have been made, including reducing the depth of the raised rear terraces, reducing the height of the front projecting garages on plots 1 and 3 to try and bring down the wall height, massing and potentially overbearing impact on the neighbours to the south. And in addition, pulled the plots back from that eastern boundary like I touched on before. So in terms of the linear layout of the village, although there is a fairly strong linear layout along New Road to the south, it's noted there are other backland properties. It is not just a wholly linear form throughout. So at the northern end of Chestnut Lane, we have a number of properties that are also set back from the road. So it isn't a wholly linear form throughout. And the site, it's important to remember, isn't a paddock, a greenfield. It is essentially hard standing that was formerly occupied by a large barn structure. So it's felt it is different to if it was just an open field, for example. I don't think I've got any further points to touch on beyond that.
Okay.
Yes. So just a point to reiterate, matter of Greenbelt was determined at outline stage, and the site was considered an infill site at that point. So it's that point has effectively been addressed at outline stage.
Okay, thank you. So members, we can open it up to questions and discussions now. I don't know if anyone has any questions at this point. It's Councillor Walker first of all, then Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Chair. I'm quite sympathetic to the fact that this was meant to be 5 houses and the outline permission was granted for that. So I kind of was wondering if you could explore the fact that these are now going to be 3 massive houses when it could have been 5, which I would have been more sympathetic to kind of grant it had there been more houses on the site, I suppose. Do we know anything about why it's been reduced and made bigger?
Clearly, we have to consider the application in front of us, and the outline just set the parameter of up to 5 houses. But beyond that, I can't comment on the current scheme and how that differs from the outline application.
That's right, because at the end of the day, it's the application as it is. The applicant has put it in for their reasons, which they're perfectly entitled to do. Do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, thank you. I just wondered if there had been any conditions in the previous or anything else that we may have known about beforehand. Thank you.
Councillor Bailey, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I was looking on planning online last night, and I wondered if you could show us on the screen plot 3 as you look at it from the garden, because it wasn't until I saw that particular slide, it made me realise just how high it's going to be, but also from the patio, it's going to have steps sloping down into the garden. Now, this isn't terribly obvious. In fact, it's not obvious to me anyway, on there. And it was only when I looked at this last night that I suddenly realised just the effect it is going to have on, and not only the height, because obviously you've got to have the height because of the area that it could be possibly flooded, but it made me realise that it is very high. And there was another plan for the front of plot 3 with the figure of a man outlined at the side, and that made you realise that the ground floor is going to be at approximately shoulder height. So in other words, it's going to be very, very much taller, and for a reason, but it's going to be very much taller. So if you're on your patio, and I imagine a privacy screen is going to be glazed glass of some type. I doubt if it's going to be anything like sort of a concrete wall, could be, but I have this horrid feeling that the privacy of the forge cottage, of the garden, is going to be severely impacted. And I will be honest, I have been out to look at this garden. It is something I don't normally do, but this particular planning application did raise concerns for me. And that's why I went online last night. So could you actually show us that it is available on Planning Online? You may not have the slides there, but I think members need to see it because it brings it home to you. Is this possible, please?
I think we can. They're just finding a way of connecting up. And,
because I think then we know actually what we're discussing. And the other thing is, while this has been brought up, the obscured garden windows for plot 3 looking towards Forge Cottage. Is this good planning? This is a new build. Do we honestly want to have whoever lives in that house having glazed windows? You know, to my mind, it's not good planning to do this. I think it is because it is so close to the boundary with the hedge of Forge Cottage, and granted, Forge Cottage has a long garden, but nevertheless, it is going to be overlooking. And I actually think they're trying to squeeze 3 very large properties with a larger footprint than 5 previous properties in a site that is reduced by about a third, which is actually what Councillor Walker was asking. Now, I can't give you absolute figures that it is approximately a third smaller, but it is around that amount. So you can see that you would naturally not be able to put even 5 small properties on the land that's now available. So to put 3 with large properties with a large footprint, it does actually really give me concern, because I do think we should be looking for really good quality design that is in keeping with the rural area, and it is rural. And also they are very suburban in not only the context where they're sited, but the actual buildings themselves are very suburban, in my opinion. Have we managed to bring up the
picture you're looking for?
The picture I'm looking for.
I think we're still looking for it. But
no hurry. I mean, we can come back to it later on.
But while they're looking for it, I'd also got a similar. I may as well ask my query while we're looking for that. And you've asked about the obscure glazing for the windows in the proposed plot 3. I just wanted to be clear in my own mind. Are those living rooms, or are they sort of cloakrooms, whatever, and bath and so on and so forth? I just want to be clear on that. But anyway, help us with the picture and those points, please.
The kitchen is one of them, isn't it? On the top there. Kitchen living area.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. So So shall I just clarify the windows first of all?
Yeah,
Just to clarify.
Clarify what you can, and while we wait for the technology to catch
So
up.
essentially, the obscure glazed windows, as you can see on the ground floor plan, first of all, are predominantly secondary windows. It's got the living room at the back, which is served by a bedroom at the back, which is served by a large glazing, utility, and bathroom to the side. There is an office which would have an obscure glazed window, but then there is a glazed partition wall and glazed front door, I guess, and side panel, which would allow light in to the office. So that's the one room that doesn't have a direct clear glazed window, but like I said, it's glazed partition. First floor level, bedroom 4, which was pointed out, there is a skylight which has been lowered during the course of the application to provide some degree of outlook, from what I understand, but otherwise it has got an obscured side window. So.
But the point being that not just the amenity of existing properties, but the amenity of people who will be living in the new house. That's what you're thinking, isn't it? And is it sort of acceptable that in a room that people might be spending quite a lot of time in, whether they're working or relaxing or whatever, I'm not actually looking out into a garden, I'm just looking at a panel of light in effect? Would that be the effect of it?
Really looking at this plan again, this is plot 3, I think. The bulk of the living space, you've got living room, kitchen, diner on the left-hand side, well served by a number of windows. The rooms that we're referring to with the obscure glazing are, several of them are rooms you wouldn't expect to have an outlook, such as the utility. So the main living spaces are, I guess, not such an issue. Potentially the bedrooms are to a degree compromised, but it's potentially not the same issue.
Councillor Bailey, are you thinking of the ground floor primarily?
I'm thinking the ground floor.
Yes. So it's the kind of.
Where the kitchen is.
Okay, thank you. That's a view. That's an opinion. I think we're still looking for pictures and things, but Councillor Price.
Yes, just to pick up on the windows. Point of clarification, obviously it's the view is going to be impaired, but oh, sorry. Can you just confirm, are those windows allowed to be opened or not?
Just a query about the windows. Can they be opened or not?
So they are conditioned to be. I'm just going to double check that, to be fixed shut. Bear with me a second. I'm just having a quick look at condition 17. Shall be permanently fixed shut and obscure glazed.
Yes, I'm getting looks of things. So we found some pictures and plans and things.
Clarify which plan.
Yes, so we're back to Councillor Bailey now. We're going to put some pictures up.
When I was looking yesterday, it's plot 3, and it actually showed you on the plan the back garden. Looking at the plot, so it would be the back garden, and there was a patio, and there were steps coming down, and that then made me realise the extent of the patio and the height. No, that's
Councillor Bailey, is that the plan you're referring to?
no, it wasn't actually. No, because those are the steps going up to the front door, are they not? Yes, they are. On the top one.
We've actually got on a different computer. I think possibly what you're So, Mr. Ashcroft, yes.
Sorry to be difficult, but it's something that really, to me, is important.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
It's just a little technical issue of one computer not being on the internet and one is, and the one that is on the internet isn't on the screen, I think. So, Mr. Ashcroft.
Chairman, if I can just confirm that point, that I've now got on the same public website that you were looking at last night, exactly that plan, and I fully see the points that you're making. Maybe we could continue the discussion, and I'll seek some technical advice from my colleague at the back about how best we can project this plan, which is not connected to the presentation that we have for this meeting, so that other members can share your experience and understand your concerns,
That'd be very useful.
which are clearly very valid. Well, thank you for raising that.
Okay, thank you very much, and please bear with us on the technical side of things here. Any other comments, questions at this stage? I had one just for a clarification, really. I think it was probably alluded to, but just for confirmation, really. Is there a difference in proximity between the distance of proposed plot 3, plot 3 of this application, and the proximity of the original outline application to the forge in particular? So, in other words, the distance between the outline permission and this full permission. Is there a difference in that?
Yeah, sorry, Councillor, but again, that's on the other computer. In terms of Councillor Bailey's question about the kitchen and having no windows, the top picture on that slide there, the window, as we look at it on the left on the ground floor, that is the kitchen window. So there is a kitchen window that looks out towards the rear. The other windows on the side, they're just secondary windows to that room, and it's those that will be double glazed. So there is that large window to the rear, which is to the kitchen.
Councillor Bailey.
Thanks. I mean, it is a large window, granted, but it's a large room. And would a room of that size normally have only one window? I'm thinking of the living conditions for people living there. Yes, there is a window, but I don't believe that this is really good design. But this is my opinion.
Oh, that's fine. That's your opinion. I mean, as the old saying goes, beauty in the eye of the beholder, and all the rest of it. So, right. Are you indicated to speak, Councillor Healy? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Just another matter, really. This proposal lies in flood zone 3. Now, I think we're all well aware of the implications of that. I found going through the report that there was probably scant regard expressed regarding that. However, the proposed developer is clearly aware of the implications to the extent he's raising the floor heights by almost 1.5 meters. So clearly there is an issue there, which as I say, I think we're probably missing. I understand again from the notes that the systems will not be linked to the sewers as we know. There'll be septic tanks, which again with flooding has numerous implications. Just on the hedging, the hedge screening that we're talking about, we're all responsible for one left-hand or right-hand side of our garden in terms of fencing and hedge. And I just wonder whose responsibility is that? And clearly, plot 3 is going to cause some problems regarding privacy, so on and so forth. I think our presenter planning officer made the point that the screening could fail at some stage. Surely somebody is responsible for that. But perhaps more importantly, with regards to the forge and the resident there, well, has a wall of sufficient height been considered to protect neighbourhood privacy? Because clearly that would be more reliable and longer lasting than screening, perhaps. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Healy. Right. Well, sorry about that. I had feedback. Could we pick up on the hedge points, please? Because I was also minded to ask that question, although I think we might be told that the ownership of the hedge is not necessarily a material condition. I don't know, but I'm sure we're about to get an answer to that. So what's the situation with regards to ownership and responsibility of the hedge? I think that's what you're asking, Councillor Healy. Should it fail at some point? Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. So, like you say, ultimately it isn't a planning consideration, it is a private legal matter. So, unfortunately, I can't clarify if that is within or not within the ownership of the applicant, but we are proposing protection measures, like I say, by way of condition. But beyond that, it is a private legal matter in terms of the management of the hedge. But I just really want to reiterate what we feel is a fairly substantial distance between the application site and the property at the Old Forge, of around about 45 metres garden length. So just considering the scenario if the hedge were to be lost or reduced in height, for example. I just wanted to also cover the points about drainage really and flood risk. So outline stage, flood risk was addressed at outline stage with the sequential and exceptions test passed, and flood risk assessment provided at that point. If planning permission were to be recommended for approval, then a condition is proposed for details of surface water drainage to be submitted, and it's proposed that the infiltration would be used as the preferred method of drainage. So rather than connecting directly to a sewer, for example. However, like I say, that would be by way of condition.
Okay. Now, while you've got that picture on there, it's just given me a little query here, because I suspect that the main concern of members at the moment is plot 3 in particular. I'm getting that feeling, and the forge. Now, where am I looking? Yeah, for clarity, the lane at the bottom there, that's where the forge is. And you can see the garden of the forge where the arrow is. So if you point the arrow up, now you can see it's a deep garden, but what is the guidance with regards to amenity? Because I suspect that from the forge itself, you might not get a great view of the possible building, but from within the garden, I think there probably is more of a chance of that. What do we do about, I know we talk about amenity of residents in a property, but what about amenity of garden space and use thereof? Do we have any guidance on that?
To just clarify, we're talking about the amenity of the neighbouring garden space, aren't we? So,
for clarity, I'm thinking yes. Referring to the forge, and yes, the garden is very deep, and also it's not necessarily in a direct straight line from the windows in the forge, but once you go into sort of kink to the right and in the garden, then you go sort of straight on down the garden, relatively speaking. That's when you see the border of the application site. So I think concern is that people who might be enjoying the amenity of the garden of the forge might have an effect or impact of the development. And would that be the case? And is that applicable? I think that's what you mean, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
thank you, Chairman. All I can really say on that point is it is a generous sized garden and the application site is to the north, avoiding direct shadowing. Beyond that, it really is a judgment as to whether there would be overbearing or not, and we have tried to work to reduce that as far as possible through the reduction in the height of the garage attached to plot 3. But beyond that, it really is a I guess, a case by case judgment, and we feel in this case, given the sizable garden and also this intervening outbuilding to the rear of the forge, that overall there wouldn't be a harmful impact on the amenities of that garden space and the use of it.
Okay, thank you for that. We're still pressing lots of buttons on here, but while we're doing that, Councillor Mason.
Yes, could you just go over the actual height of the buildings, because they are all built up considerably by a certain number of feet, and I know that my extension in my own house has been high, you know, the property has been lifted, but I must admit it's only probably by about that, you know, a few feet. The thought of it going up even past my shoulders, I'm only 5 foot, seems quite large. So how high is it in comparison to other houses? Can you just show me? Is that the one that shows how much higher it is than? No, it doesn't. How much higher it is than other properties in that area? Because to me, it does look.
Well, I think I read somewhere.
If you didn't see that line, where the floor starts inside the house, that would look quite high, quite a height.
I think, and I'm sure this will get clarification or not, but if you look at paragraph 39, and it does refer to the finished floor height, but it also refers to the height, the ridge height, approximately 8.2 metres height relative to the existing ground level, broadly reflecting the roof height of the neighbouring stories on neighbouring 2-storey properties on number 6 to 8 Chestnut Lane. So I think possibly the answer to your question there is the proposed height of the height of the proposed buildings is broadly the same as the ones that are on Chestnut Lane. That's my understanding.
They must be high too, then.
If I may, you can actually see on the screen that there's on the right-hand side plot. It looks like a vehicle in the drive. Now, to the left of it, you've got a gable end, and look down to the bottom of the steps, and you can see a figure drawn, and you can see that it is approximately shoulder height, given on the height of that figure. But I think that gives you an idea. It's shoulder height at floor level, so it really is quite raised up. And this is one of the things actually that did concern me.
What I'm saying is the windows are high. It's not just the house. It's the windows are higher than a house that was just built on the ground.
Okay, I've got that. We've got that. Mr. Ashcroft's going to come in now with the photographs that we've been struggling to find and explain where we are with it.
Chairman, thanks for that. What I'd like to do is to take you through these drawings, which my understanding from the Councillor Bailey's helpful description is that this is the same drawing to which she was looking at last night. So if I can share this with members, because clearly it will help you come to a judgment on these issues. And then once we've done that, if we could take any questions on these drawings, and then hopefully, from a technological point of view, we can then get rid of this and go back to the mainstream presentation. Because effectively, I'm screen sharing something that effectively all our colleagues have managed to get for us. So effectively, as Councillor Bailey and other members have been saying, top left show this illustrative street scene of plot 1 from Chestnut Lane, where again you'll see, as Mr. Hilton has explained, the ground floor levels of the buildings because of flood issues. To the right here, I think is the point that Councillor Bailey very helpfully explained, where we've got illustrative scenes of plots 2 and 3, where you see so that you see the height of an indicative person against the steps going up, and as Councillor Mason says, you can see that effectively the lower end of the ground floor window is above a person's, as it were, head height, because of the floor levels. You'll see that partially working through there on the other elevation. If I scroll down You'll see the comments that Councillor Bailey was making earlier about the layout of the buildings, and you see for both plots 1 and plots 2, and indeed, in fact, all 3 plots, you see the semicircular terraced areas as they come out. Yeah, which has now been reduced in depth in order to give those significant garden areas. And then what you also see is an indication of the new hedge there. So hopefully that gives members some indication of what Councillor Bailey had seen last night and raised in the discussion earlier.
Councillor Bailey, does that help?
Could I ask, so the steps are still there, the patios have been reduced in depth out into the garden, is that right? But the steps are still there?
Yeah, I think so, yes.
Mm. And there's also a patio, semicircular there, to the south of what it was semicircular patio. It looks as though there's a sort of a square shaped bit at the side, which is actually running quite close to the hedge, I think.
I think
The one we had, the slide we had a moment ago, but would show it or did show it. Where you had the semicircular patio.
So your question is
could we just have a quick look at it again, because that's it. And so you've got in plot 3, which is the bottom right, you've got the semicircular patio, which is now being trimmed in size, but there's also a patio, or is it a roof? Is it a roof at the side? It's hard to tell from here because is that the oblong bit to the side? Is that actually roof or is that patio as well? It looks to patio to me. So that will be very close to the hedge, and very high, overlooking into the garden of the Forge cottage.
So can we confirm that's that patio? Is it the height that we've just been referring to, and the proximity to the hedge again?
Thank you, Chairman. So it is of the height referred to, but as you appreciate, these are the previous set of plans, and the depth of the patios and plots 1 and 3 has been substantially reduced, at least on the section closest to the southern boundary, being fully conscious of trying to limit the ability to potentially overlook those neighbours.
Okay, thank you. Anybody? Councillor Boy.
I know that the officer said that hedging isn't a material consideration, but it's where the boundary is that concerns me. Is the hedge on the applicant's side, rooted on the applicant's side, or is it on the Forge garden side? Because that becomes a matter of ownership, and surely if it belongs to the person in the Forge and it's damaged during this process, there should be some way of mitigating that.
So it's a similar question to what we had a little moment ago about should the hedge fail, whenever, or even though there's a condition in there, who would be responsible for it? But of course, that is it's a separate matter to planning. But I understand what you're saying. Or do you want to just clarify?
If it is actually part of the Forge, a land, then it's really important that there's some mitigating issues there about protecting it vigorously during the construction phase, because that's protecting somebody else's property.
I think there is a condition in about protecting during construction. There is a condition about that. I'm sure I saw it. There is
50 centimetre root zone we were told about by the gentleman that spoke to us on behalf.
Condition number 2.
It was a gentleman who spoke to us on behalf of the owner of Forge Cottage. He gave us the three sort of bullet points, and he also said there was, I believe, but do correct me, a 50 centimetre root zone.
Do you want to come back on that, or?
So the 50 centimetre root protection zone, I think, is what's been pulled from the arboricultural report submitted to the outline stage, but we, like I said before, would be seeking a separate full plan of tree protection measures as a way of condition, which may differ from the initial findings of the arboricultural report. So I don't think we can categorically say it would be a 50 centimetre roof protection zone at this point.
Right. Councillor Mason. Oh, sorry, were you wanting to speak? Sorry, I thought saw the light on. Councillor Upton, yes.
Some very brief points. I'm minded of the time. I believe I was at the original meeting when the outline permission was given, and I voted for it. I've got for and against really at the moment. I'll make a decision in a minute. Regarding the comments about Greenbelt, in my opinion, it's hard standing. It's brownfield site in all but name, and the site is reduced from when I recall the earlier meeting. And so you could say, well, up to 5 dwellings, but a smaller site, therefore, ergo 3 of them. I like the design. I think it's traditional design. That's a personal view. No problem with that. And I think the architect has done well to incorporate the first floor accommodation, mainly in the roof void, and the ridge height, as we've discussed, is okay with me because it complements others in the local area. However, I still have concerns about the oversized footprints of these 3 dwellings on this reduced site. I understand the 1.5 metre above ground level and the steps and the raised patios, etc. And I do take the point that if I or an average person was standing on those rear patios or the corner patio that Councillor Bailey refers to, then they probably would, if you count 1.5 metre, a 2 metre person on a patio, then they've got a good eye view, in my opinion, over a 2 metre high hedge, wall, fence or whatever, but it's into the back of a long garden of the forge, and we've heard comments about that. So that somewhat helps me on that decision. The windows being obscure and fixed shut, well, looking at the floor plans, first and ground floor, toilets, utilities, and that, a little bit of concern about the office, as was commented on, an office with an obscure fixed shut window, but then it's balanced by a glazed screen, as I understand it, opposite the entrance hall as you're coming in. So, yeah. So I'm for and against at the moment. I need to make a decision. There's quite a few issues there, probably on balance. The pluses outweigh the negatives for me, but that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Upton. That's very helpful. I don't see really anyone desperate to go. Oh, Councillor Walker.
I just want to say, did we get an answer to your question, Councillor Butler, about the distances? I wonder if you could hear that answer.
Yes, it's a difference, the proximity between the outline planning application and this application to the border. That was the one, wasn't it? Yes, I don't think we did. No, we did not. So,
yeah, we don't have that information with us, unfortunately, but we can ask our colleagues to see if they can find it, as they're on the internet. But another point I would like to raise is on the plans that you see before you on the screen, to the right of the building that's on the left, you can see the outline of number 8. So you can see the comparison in height between the existing property and the proposed properties just next to the tree. So that is a comparison between the existing height and the proposed height of the buildings. On the right-hand elevation, you can see the outline of the office building that's currently occupied by the current occupiers of the site. So that's just to give you a comparison with the existing heights of the buildings in that locality. So in terms of the design of the proposals, the existing ones are 2-storey, but the design of this proposal, as it says in the report, it's been amended to try and reduce the overall height to make it more comparable with the adjacent buildings. And that's what those outlines signify there. So even though it is raised substantially, because of the design, because of the inclusion of rooms in the roof, it actually reduces the overall height to something that matches what's existing.
So hence the point. So although the rooms are higher, the overall height of the building is in line with the existing buildings. Councillor Mason.
Yes, well, I think I've talked about it enough. and I'd like to put forward a recommendation for refusal. The reasons being, I take the ridge height, the windows are still high, they're higher than would normally be in a house, as would the patio be higher, as would all of their windows be higher, and patios. It's not just, we've concentrated on number 3, it's not just that one. Overbearing, and although we're saying the green belt has been almost put to one side on the previous application, it is still green belt. It hasn't been taken out of the green belt, has it? No. Okay. So if anybody wants to add to that, I would like to propose refusal.
Okay, thank you. So I think we've got the general gist of that. There are points in there that are justifiable reasons, aren't there? So, yep. So, sorry.
I presume we are looking at policy 10 as the points, I think.
Looking at, sorry.
Policy 10 within the plan.
Yes.
Yeah, just for clarification.
Okay, so obviously it would have to be worded in an appropriate way, but I get the gist of what you're saying. Do you have a seconder for that at this stage? Councillor Bailey, okay, do you want to add anything to that? Okay, thank you. Righty-ho, well, we've spent over an hour on this, and quite rightly so, because it's an important application. Do you want to clarify is that in particular referring to plot 3, or are you referring to the whole application?
I think it applies to the whole application.
Okay. And you've got an answer to the question of the distances. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And also, I'm getting a message here. There is an answer to the question I had about the clarification of distances. So we're just going to get that now, just before we go further with that.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman. Well, just wanted to say really that obviously outline stage it was an indicative plan, and you know what I'm going to say. Unfortunately, they didn't actually provide measurements, as far as I'm aware, at that stage, but purely indicative. So I don't think we can give an answer about a set distance from the board, unfortunately.
That's fine. Well, we've checked it, and you can understand why we were asking that question, but we haven't got the answer for it. So we've got a clear application in front of us anyway. So and again, as ever, we're making a judgment on the application that's in front of us. So we've had a recommendation for refusal for reasons given by Councillor Mason, seconded by Councillor Bailey. Just before we go to a vote on this, are we happy that we can form a set of words, because we have to formulate a set of words should it, well, we have to, because it's been moved and seconded, hasn't it? So we are able to do that, aren't we? Oh, right. Okay, so I get the feeling there's not many people, no one else wanted to speak. We have spoken a lot on this, covered a lot of ground in detail, heard a lot. We've got a recommendation to refuse permission moved and seconded. I think we better have a show of hands now to show whether we're in favour of that recommendation or not. So those in favour of that recommendation, please show. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And those against? 1, 2, 3. That's a hand up for 4. Any abstentions? So can you run through those numbers? Because I'm struggling to see them.
I've got 6-4.
6-4. Right. So there's no abstentions. So that's 6 in favour of the recommendation to refuse, 4 against. Yes. So that means that the permission is refused for reasons given. So what we will need to do now is confirm the words. Do we do that now, or do we do that for the benefit of the report? Do it later, I think. But we've got the gist of your reasons. So right, thank you for your contributions on that. So we will move on now. So thank you to our visitors for contributions. And the joy of planning. So our next application, this is, if we'll just wait for the doors to shut because they'll slam. No, it won't. I thought it was going to, this is Keyworth, land to the corner of Ashley Road and Church Drive, Keyworth. It's an erection of a single-storey dwelling, including associated landscaping, parking and access works. And again, Mr. Hilton, please.
Thank you, Chairman. So members are advised that there is a late representation which has been circulated amongst members, hopefully, which is more of a point of clarification. I don't know if members have received that or not.
Yes, we have. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, we just to confirm members have received that.
So that just refers to the subdivision of the plot from the property at number 46. So it is separate now.
It's a separate piece of land now. It's a separate site. It may have been once upon a time, might have been the host property, as I would have called it, but no, it's not now. It's completely separate. Yeah. So yes, we did get that.
Okay. Thanks, Chairman. Just another point of clarification is in the numbering of the conditions. There is an error in terms of the numbering, jumping from numbers 5 to 7, which would be amended on a decision notice should it be recommended for approval. So, plan permission is sought for the erection of a single-storey detached dwelling. So, the application site relates to a plot on the corner of Ashley Road and Church Drive in Keyworth. It comprises an open area of land, like I said, formerly comprising part of the garden of number 46, but now subdivided and separate and under separate ownership. There is a high hedge screening along the front and side boundaries of the site. So just running through the site photos, this is just a general view across the front of the site, and here you can see the former host property on the right hand side at number 46 and the new fence subdividing, and this is a neighbouring property on Church Drive. And another view of the boundary hedge. So just looking at this photo, on your left hand side there would be an access formed requiring removal of a section of hedge, but otherwise the intention is to retain the remainder of the hedge, and you'll see that is a condition to retain that. So just another view looking straight down Ashley Road. Application site on your left hand side. Just make members aware there is a bungalow on the opposite corner plot on the right hand side, and what we are looking at is something of probably a similar scale, low single-storey building. So just looking at the application plans, proposes for us a single-storey one-bed house with a single parking space taken off Church Drive, garden space to the Ashley Road frontage, and then a second garden space to the rear. Looking at elevation plans, some amendments have taken place during the course of the application, including the addition of a canopy over the main entrance to try and define the entrance of the property and so make that a bit more distinctive, along with some minor changes to window detailing to create the sort of appearance of a domestic property rather than an ancillary outbuilding to sort of strengthen its overall appearance. So as you can see from the height, it is a fairly modest structure. This application follows two previous applications. One was for a two-storey dwelling, which was refused, and then a subsequent application for a split height 1.5-storey building. So this final iteration, I say, is quite a low structure in comparison to what's put forward previously. So just look back at the site plan. As you can see, the building would not project significantly forward of the frontage of properties either on Ashley Road or Church Drive. It's a fairly minor projection, perhaps 2 metres forward of number 46 on the Ashley Road frontage. In terms of residential amenity, it is set back from the boundary with Church Drive, as you can see, number 5 Church Drive, hedgerow screening, no windows in that end elevation facing the neighbour to the top there. And overall, the site is centrally located. Although there's one parking space, which is sufficient to meet the requirements of the Nottinghamshire Highway Design Guide, which specifies that one bed dwelling should have at least a parking space. The site is centrally located, approximately 5 minutes walk from the shops, both from the square and the shops on Wolds Drive. So accordingly, the application is before you with recommendation to grant conditional planning permission.
Thank you very much. And we have speakers on this item as well. We have two speakers, and the first speaker is Mr. Nathaniel Radcliffe, who is speaking to object. So thank you for your patience. And so you see what you have to do. You have up to 5 minutes to speak, and as soon as you're ready, if you press the right-hand button.
Good afternoon, Chair and committee members. I'm a resident local to the application site, and I'm here today to represent objections from all local residents. As planning officer states, applications for this development have been submitted 3 times, with 2 previous applications being rejected. Over the course of the applications, the dwelling size has reduced from a 2-storey 3-bedroom building, partial 2-storey 1-bedroom building, and now a single-storey 1-bedroom building by way of design amendments. However, the amendments in the third application, as described by the planning officer, do not materially change the objections to the development as outlined by myself, multiple neighbours, the parish council and the borough ward councillor over all applications submitted to date. And these are as follows. The addition of road access for the proposed dwelling is considered unsafe by local residents. In our view, will significantly increase road safety risks, reducing visibility of the Ashley Road Church Drive junction, particularly for our children travelling to and from South Wolds and Nottingham Road schools. The proposed dwelling allows for parking for only 1 vehicle, therefore visitor parking will be on street, which will also add to the existing significant congestion, visibility and traffic problems on Ashley Road and Church Drive. We also believe that the development impact is incorrectly represented in the application. The main elevation is clearly intended to be Church Drive, where the road access and front door is to be situated. There is little mention of this in the report, where only the Ashley Road building line is mentioned. Therefore, the dwelling must be considered a Church Drive address, and in that context, there will be significant detrimental impact to the street scene because the proposed building is at least 2 metres forward of the Church Drive building line. This is contrary to adopted planning policy, and it is crucial in our view to keep to that building line if a development is to fit acceptably into the local context. The loss of mature hedgerow is mentioned, but to accommodate the new dwelling, there will be removal for the building access and also on the plans for the boundary to 5 Church Drive. There is also the loss of amenity with the removal of significant mature garden habitat from the adjacent property, 46 Ashley Road, by the infill development, and this both go against local planning policy. The dwelling of 5 Church Drive is directly adjacent to the application site to the west and has windows on that elevation. The proposed new dwelling will be situated approximately 5 metres from Church Drive and will be directly overlooked into the western side, which is bedroom space, and also the courtyard garden, creating privacy issues for 5 Church Drive and the new dwelling occupiers. It is quite telling that over the course of the 3 applications, the dwelling size has reduced significantly. In the third application, it currently stands at most 43 square metres gross internal area, which is 15% below the nationally described space standard for a 1-bedroom, 2-person occupancy dwelling. In addition, the planning officer directly notes that the rear garden space also falls below the Rushcliffe Residential Design Guideline minimum garden size. This, together with the forward position relative to the Church Drive building line, leads to the conclusion that the plot is fundamentally too small to accommodate even a single-storey 1-bedroom dwelling with adequate size design. The building will also be recessed to reduce overall ridge height, which will require stepped access to all areas of the dwelling, and this is contrary to existing wheelchair accessibility design guidance and standards. Despite this poor design attempt to hide the proposed new dwelling, because the plot size cannot realistically accommodate it, it will still be completely detrimental to the local street context. This, alongside all of the previous points I have made, mean that the application should respectfully be refused by the committee. Thank you for your time and the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you very much. That's very clear, so thank you for that. And, oh, sorry, I should have asked, do any members have any points of clarification? No? Okay, so you're free. So our next speaker on this is one of the local ward members, Councillor Edivine, please.
Good afternoon, everyone, committee chairman. I'd like to say, and I will be repeating quite a few of the things that have already been said, and the brevity of my comments doesn't reflect in any way anything but my continued opposition to this, what I consider to be an unsustainable development. As you've heard, it's not just the corner of Ashley Road, but it's also the corner of Church Drive, with the entrance to the house on Church Drive. When I first read the committee report, I did consider very seriously withdrawing my objection, but on reflection, I decided that there are still some very significant issues that deserve consideration. As has been pointed out, this is a already subdivided corner plot, which has been split up before planning permission had been sought. This is the third application, and it started off as a two-storey dwelling, each application getting smaller until we end up with today's application of an extremely small one-bedroom bungalow with an extremely small garden. So small is the house that it's below the recommended national guidelines for a one-bedroom, two-person dwelling, which should be 50 square metres. At 43 square metres, this is 14% below that accepted guideline. The report states that the rear garden is 13 square metres less than the borough's own guidelines. And as a percentage, this is 22% smaller than is deemed acceptable. In my opinion, just because there is a further small area, provision of a split garden should not justify allowing development which has a rear garden smaller than our own guidelines. I'd really like to sort of sum this up by saying this building is too small, the garden is too small, the building line on Church Drive is not mentioned in the report, but it is 2 metres in front of the existing building line. I welcome the fact that one of the conditions proposed is the loss of any permitted development rights. But to me, this actually underlines that this building is unsustainable, because once this building has served its immediate purpose, it will become a house that's too small, with a garden that's too small, that doesn't allow for any addition to make it more habitable, that doesn't fit in with the existing building line on Church Drive, and doesn't fit in with the existing street scene. So I urge the committee to not allow this application.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Oh, sorry, again, it's a new thing we do. Does anyone have any points of clarification with the member? No. Oh, sorry, yes, Councillor Murray. We will do, but at this point, we're just checking to see if you've got any points of clarification with the local member before he sits down. So, okay. Thank you, Councillor Edivine. So yes, now we'll bring the plans back up. We're now in the stage where we're discussing and deciding. So are you just wanting to look at the plans at this stage, or have you got a question?
I want to see where the
Could you put your microphone on?
I want to see where the car would be parked, whether it would come out onto Church Drive or
Right, okay, so because we've heard that the access is going to be from Church Drive, so if we could zoom in on the driveway bit. Can you see that? Does that help?
I think so, yes.
Okay.
It's not very clear, is it?
It's not very clear, but you can see it. So you mull over that. Councillor Upton, did you want to say something?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes. I just wanted to clarify what the local member referred to as about garden size. It's on paragraph 26 of the report, and it gives information there about gardens, but it finishes, the two garden areas combined would exceed the minimum garden standards for the proposed dwelling. Is that correct or not?
A very direct question. Garden size, is that correct?
Thank you, Chairman. So the report refers to, well, first of all, the minimum garden size set out in our residential design guide for a one-bed dwelling is 55 square metres, and the report states that the rear garden is 45 square metres. However, there's also a private front garden due to the high boundary hedge screening along there. So combined, the two garden spaces would exceed the 55 square metres.
So that's answered your question, Councillor Upton. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Chair. Do we have a map of the interior of the property at all that we could look at? Thank you.
That's fairly clear. Have you got a question about it, or no? You were just curious to see it.
Only I was just thinking about it in terms of everyone's talking about the size of it, so I was interested to know what it would look like inside if it's so small. And you know, you have to admit that the placement of the shower room is a bit. I'm assuming that's opposite the front door. That shower room.
Yeah.
Okay, just trying to get my head around it. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Did I see another hand go up on this? I was just wondering, a point of clarification from me. It was something that Mr. Ratcliffe mentioned, and referring to the building line, and also I think Councillor Edeby may have mentioned it as well. Can we just be clear on building line in comparison with other properties on Ashley Road? On Ashley Road, because on the map we see that. Sorry, I beg your pardon. I mean Church Drive. Sorry, yeah, the building line on Church Drive, because the red line area obviously shows the whole plot, but that's not necessarily the building line, is it? Or is it?
Thank you, Chairman. So as you can see from this plan here, the building to the top of the plan is number 5 Church Drive. It's probably not very clear on what's on the screen. And then the building to the right-hand side is number 46 Ashley Road, so you get an idea of the sort of level of protection. We don't refer to building or have a very fixed approach to building lines as such. It is very much a judgment case by case. I don't think we can absolutely categorically stick to a specific building line.
No, that's okay. Because the point has been made, but I just wanted clarification on that, really. So thank you for that. Right. Any other questions or comments on this, or are we going to make a decision? Councillor Healy.
Excuse me. Thank you, Chair. The hedge, it is quite a high hedge, I must admit, and it encloses the space completely, so it's very, very private in that respect. But have we got an assurance that that hedge would remain? Plus the tree, because there's also a tree, an established tree in the garden.
I think paragraph 5, condition number 5 might help in that respect. It does refer to the removal of part of a hedge, but it then says frontages shall be retained in the court. So
what page, Chairman?
On page 74, condition number 5.
Thank you.
think that's the relevant one.
Okay, yes. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
And Mr. Ashcroft.
Chairman, maybe perhaps members come to a judgment in terms of some of the questions and some of the discussion that you've been having. I think there's two issues that are running side by side here. First is your consideration of the details of this application in relation to the plot. And plainly, you're coming to your judgments about how that property would line up and relate to the properties on either side. And inevitably, that's just a matter of judgment, and you'll come to your own view on that. I think also there's a broader issue here, and again, some members have started to pick up the issues. The first is that plainly the government's ambition is that development comes forward in sustainable locations and on brownfield sites. Plainly, this isn't a classic brownfield site, but it's within the curtilage of an existing house. We've heard about the plot has been broken down over time, but it is what it is, and this is a sustainable location. And inevitably, by bringing forward development in existing built-up areas, it's reducing the pressures on the green belt and other parts of Rushcliffe. So there's that to weigh in the round. Plainly, and I think some members have started to look at the issue about, notwithstanding some of those technical issues about the size of the house, what this is a proposal to come forward with a relatively modest house, relatively small house, probably geared up either for single people or older people. Plainly, it isn't a traditional family house, but there will be many people looking for a smaller house for a variety of reasons. Yeah. And again, that's an issue that you can bear in mind, because plainly we are seeking to address housing needs, and inevitably the standard modern estate type housing development doesn't cater for development of this nature. So again, hopefully, Chairman, that gives you a broader picture within which you can come to a decision.
It does. Thank you, Mr. Ashcroft. Right, I suspect I don't think there's anyone else wishing to speak on this. Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I'm right in catching the information that this size of the house is 14% below accepted guidelines. How are those guidelines reached? Because obviously it's going to make a difference as to the person's enjoyment of living there, or just, I mean, it does seem not everybody is going to have a large expanse to live in, but if it's 14% below the accepted guidelines, is this something we should be concerned about, please?
So Matt. Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. First, I just want to clarify the guidelines that were referred to, whether we're referring to internal space standards or garden size, which I think was what was alluded to before, just to make sure we're on the right page, really.
Well, I think Council, we've spoken about garden size, and we've agreed that that is within guidelines. I think Councillor Bailey is referring to the physical size of the property. Yeah.
Because you said the garden is 22% smaller than the national guidelines and our own guidelines, which, you know, is something one has to take into consideration. But I'm a little concerned if it's 14% low, the actual living area within the house, living space, is 14% below accepted guidelines. Is this something we should be concerned about? Thank you.
Mr. Hilton.
So the nationally prescribed housing standards is a good indicator of whether a development is intensive or not. It's something that is not something that is an adopted policy, but is a good indicator. My understanding is that for a one-bed dwelling, 37 square metres of floor space should be provided. And looking at the plan here, we can see that the dwelling is approximately 10 metres in length, in depth, and 4.1 metres in breadth. Looking at that at the main section, and then you've got an additional 3.9 metre wide projection to the side. Obviously, that's external measurement, but internally, the floor space would exceed the minimum nationally prescribed floor space standards.
Thank you very much. Right, no other speakers on this. We've got a recommendation on page 73 to grant permission. Do I have anyone wanting to move that? Councillor Mason, thank you. Do we have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Healy, right, okay. So, and just to confirm as well, does anyone else wish to speak on this? So no. So we've had quite a good discussion, I think. We've heard different points in favour, points against, queries, comments, concerns. We've got the recommendation moved and seconded as per the report. Can I have a show of hands, please? Those in favour of the recommendation, please show. And is there anyone against? No, so that's unanimous. So 10 for, none against, so permission is granted. But thank you everybody for your contributions. We'll go to West Bridgeford now. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry, we've got to do something with the, what are we doing?
We're waiting for the next case officer to come down.
Oh, sorry, yeah, we've got, so yes, we're doing musical chairs now because we're waiting for case officers to come down from the office. So it's 4:15. If you want a little break, 5-minute break, no more. Back at 20 past, please. Okay, thank you for your swift return. And we have a couple of applications left to go. And so this next one is now 18 Mount Sorrel Drive, West Bridgford. It's the construction of a two-storey front extension, first floor side extension, first floor rear extension, single-storey rear extension, application of render to all elevations. And Mr. Sharman, please, you're talking us through this, aren't you?
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. I think we've got a late rep to be read out.
Yes, we have. You're quite right. We have got some late representations. Are we doing those first, or are we waiting to do the presentation first?
I think this late rep has not been circulated to committee, so it's a case of just everything else has been circulated in paper format. So this I'm just going to read out. It's come from Councillor Gow.
Right.
So we have a slide also.
Yes, we do. So we'll do the late representation now. So because it literally is a late representation, then we'll go into the presentation. So. Okay. Mr. Dennis, please.
So I'll just read this out for you. It is very unfortunate that I cannot be at the meeting since I only learned that this plan was going to committee at the end of last week, by which time I already had a work commitment for Thursday afternoon. I note that one of the neighbours who also wanted to comment at the meeting is in the same position. I have a number of issues with this plan, but since I'm having to contact the committee in this way, I will just focus on what I see as the worst problem. My main concern is for the house at number 20. As far as I recall, I have had no contact with the current owner, although they have commented, but this is a problem that will impact on that house and the whole area in perpetuity, whoever lives there. Number 20 is smaller and set back compared to number 18, the applicant's house, as shown on the image below from Google Maps. Number 18 is on the left, number 20 is on the right. For this reason, it is absolutely clear to any layperson with no expertise in architecture or planning that the new extension will be overbearing, overshadowing, and have a massing effect on number 20. Note that the new two-storey extension will be to the south and slightly east of the house at number 20 and be right up to the boundary. This is the worst possible situation. The mornings are when the front of number 20 currently gets sunlight, and this extension will take much of that light. For this reason, if this extension happens, I expect that in the long run, the tree in front of number 20 will be at risk. You will note from Google Maps and the site plan that the houses in Abbey Park are not arranged in straight lines. This estate was laid out carefully as a park with green space, mixed housing, large family homes cheek by jowl with small bungalows for elderly people, cut-throughs between roads and a general human scale feel. I recommend the committee visit the estate to understand what good architecture looked like in the 1970s. Piecemeal extensions leading in places to enormous buildings, bearing down on smaller houses and general erosion of green space, including moving of the boundaries to public space, risk gradually eroding this environment. I have sat on planning committee and heard, and in many cases supported arguments against what are really minor alterations to houses with little impacts on neighbours in villages, but we continually allow huge extension in West Bridgford. We all treasure and want to protect the rural environment wherever we live, as we all benefit from pleasant green space. But people who live in towns also want to protect and appreciate their urban environment. It isn't all just bricks and concrete to us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And so we now go into Mr. Sharman's presentation, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think the matters in the late representation there are largely covered in the existing committee report for members, just for information. And members should also have one other formal late representation in their papers as well. Yeah, super. Okie dokie. So yes, this is an application at 18 Mount Sorrel Drive. The application itself is for the construction of two-storey front extension, first floor side extension, first floor rear extensions, single-storey rear extension, and the application of render to all elevations. So just to run members through the site plan at the moment, you can see here that the property lies in a largely residential area of West Bridgford in the Abbey Park area. And from the site plan here, you can just see its relationship, which is, as Councillor Gowan says, quite cheek by jowl with a number of neighbouring properties, largely detached neighbours, all of two-storey scale. So just to take members through some site plans themselves, starting here. So this is the entrance to the cul-de-sac where the property is located. You can see a number of similar properties as you head down the road, and the application property is actually at the far end of the road. You can just about see it where the road ends. Moving closer to the property, again, just another view, you can see the property better now, and properties on the left-hand side which have been extended, altered including the provision of render to them. So again, just moving a bit closer to the application property, which is the one with tile hangings at the bottom of the picture. Just a picture of the property and its direct neighbour, which has been extended in quite a contemporary fashion. And then the neighbour in context of its neighbour to the north side, which is a property that hasn't been significantly altered or extended. So again, just showing the close relationship between the properties. Neither property is built up to the boundary. There is a separation between the application property on the left-hand side as you look at it and the neighbour number 20 to the right-hand side. This is a view across the front of the application property, just showing that cheek by jowl nature with number 16 Mount Sorrel. Moving to the side of the property, so this is the south side garden of the application property. No works are proposed to this side, but again, just showing the host application site nature. A view across the back with a single story rear extension. This is where the first floor rear extension is proposed over the top of. And moving round the rear of the property, and here we are again looking at number 20 Mount Sorrel. So we're looking at the neighbour to the north again with a blank side elevation. And again, just viewing the rest of the garden. And this is a view from Rufford Way, which goes across the rear. So the rear is not necessarily hidden and unseen, as they are largely. It's actually quite a public elevation. You can see it from the open space and Rufford Way. Members may also note that that rear extension that they can see, which is partially constructed, the rear extension is the one considered under this application, but they should note it has received planning permission previously. So they do have permission for those works already. Moving into the application plans, just a set of existing plans for reference. And moving on to the proposed plans, might be easier if I zoom. So you can see to the front elevation, this is the proposed two-storey porch. Again, to highlight to members, this aspect of the application has previously been granted permission and this remains extant. We then have the new first floor side extension. This is over the garage. The first floor being in line with the existing first floor of the house and featuring a small gablet to add interest. It's not set down or set back as some side extensions are. It's in line with and matching the heights of the existing property. So moving across the property here, you can see the first floor rear extensions. At the moment, members may remember, you've got one gable on the rear and then a single story. You end up with creating a multitude of gables across the rear of the property, a mixture of set to the ridgeline and then set down from the ridgeline. And these are to create extended bedrooms at first floor level. And then to the rear of the first floor side, there's also a gable feature to fit in with those extensions. The whole of the property is to be finished in a render colour as well. And the rear extension is on the back of the plan there. So in terms of the main considerations for this application, they are design and also the amenity of neighbours and of future occupiers. From a design perspective, the rear first floor extension, it is quite a visible feature. However, it is considered actually better to add interest to this elevation as seen from the road. It's not considered to be overly dominant or detract from the character of the original property. The first floor side extension was not set down or set back. It is considered, again, to add interest to the front elevation of the property and be sympathetic to the characteristics of the area, which, as you'll note from the photographs, is quite a varied character with different materials. Similarly, the use of render is not considered out of keeping with the characteristics of the area, given the neighbours also use render and there's hanging tiles, timber and a number of different materials. It has quite a varied character. In terms of the amenity impacts, the first floor rear extensions largely face over towards the road and are not considered to have any significant impacts on any adjacent neighbours. The porch and the single story rear extension have previously been granted planning permission and are not considered to have significant impacts. And the key consideration here, and as Councillor Gowland did mention, is the first floor side extension and the relationship it has with number 20. It is due south of that neighbour, and they do have a lounge window at the front of their property. The lounge is also served by a window to the rear. That has been converted to a doorway into a conservatory on the rear of that property. So it was a dual fronted room with outlook to both sides. They've got a conservatory on the back of it now, which still provides light and outlook. In terms of the 45-degree rule, it is just about on the verge in terms of that. It does about meet the 45-degree rule, so it's not significantly out of accordance with that general rule of thumb. It's not obviously, yes, it's not a rule. It doesn't have to meet it, but it is a guideline. So it doesn't fall significantly outside of that. So it's your officer's consideration that whilst it may have some impact on that neighbour, it's not a significant impact, which is the policy test required under policy 1 of the local plan part 2. As such, the recommendation before you on page 91 of the report is that planning permission be approved for the development. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And we have a guest speaker on this item, Dr. Chauhan. Thank you again for your, I know you've been sitting through the whole meeting, so thank you for your patience. And you are the applicant, so you have up to 5 minutes to talk to us. As soon as you're ready, press the right button and the red light will come on. Okay.
That's why I'd like to thank the planning department. They were working with me throughout the whole 5 or 6 months. And also thank you very much for the committee for allowing me to come and say a few words. Basically, the planning department has already explained, everything, what exactly is happening. And me being a layman, it was difficult for me to get hold of the things that what exactly the planning application and everything, go through. But for my interest, just to show you, I have read all those things, that what exactly does it mean, so that I can, because it's always good when you come to a meeting, you should know that what you're going to be questioned or talked about. But the planning department has made my life easy to explain all that 45-degree and all that kind of, things and everything. I just want to give you a small idea of the things. Basically, I've got 4 children, and me and my wife, there are 6 people living in that, property. We have got 3 bedrooms upstairs. Initially, there was even a smaller than a box room over there, where was there just one study table over there. And there was a small stud wall. So we break that stud wall. So 3 of my daughters can be in one room, and one of my son can be in the other room. So on the top, we have got just 3 rooms. On the bottom of the, first floor, we have got our, kitchen. We have got 1 children's room, because 2 of my daughters are quite young. One is 7 years of age. One is about 11 years of age. So we thought we give them a children's room. And one, I made a small study room for myself, so that I can deal with all the patients and everything from home when I'm on call. Because I can't sit on any other open space due to the confidentiality and GDPR rules. So I have to be in a separate. So I've got a very small, what you call it, an office or a study room. And then we have got a family room and sitting area. So if you look in that locality, in that area, almost every second house has done extensions and done the upgradations and everything. And as far as I know, the first floor of every house has got 4 bedrooms. Okay. So we thought of, thinking that, with 6 people living in the house, and if we have got a guest, for example, at the moment, I've got my father-in-law and mother-in-law visiting us, we have to give 1 room to them. So 3 of the kids are in 1 room, and we are in me and my son and my wife is in the, other, area. And so I went through all this thing with the planning department, everything. We did make, quite a lot of changes of those maps and everything. And we look at the garden area, and nothing is building up in the garden. We are not doing any building on everything. We look at the 45-degree. In fact, I stood up and with my limited knowledge of that thing, I looked at the window, I looked at the sun and this and that. And I discussed it with all of the, people and, and everything. So I do not have the figures, just like the other people has explained it to you, that 1.6 meter, 1.7 meter or anything. But I am very humbly requesting the committee that please consider this application, with the fact there are 6 people living in the house, and there are my father-in-law and my mother-in-law still there. So you can well imagine that if we have got the guest, The other houses, they have done the same kind of rendering and extensions and, you know, all that kind of things. And I'm not sure whether it is related to this, you know, application or not. About 3 or 4 weeks back, since we made this, you know, application and everything, we did come through some very difficult times. And on one occasion, there were eggs thrown on our windows, which I have taken the pictures and sent it to the planning department also. Don't know whether it's related to our application or whether it's not related. I'm not, you know, joining them together. But it is a difficult time for our family.
30 seconds.
Children are going to a very good school, so we do not want to move away from this locality, this area. So you can say that me and wife, we are both doctors, and we had decided that we're gonna put our step down, we'll fight on principles. And this is my request to all the committee members. Thank you.
Thank you, and bang on time as well. That's it, that's good. Do any members have any points of clarification on Councillor Murray?
With your extensions, how many bedrooms will you have?
4 bedrooms upstairs.
4. Right.
So it's 4 bedroom? Yes, sorry.
How many cars can you park at the front?
Minimum 3 cars.
3 cars.
Very easily. I come to your question, you're absolutely right. And to answer, I have read this. This is a residential parking guideline from the National Highway. I've read it. Okay, so it does qualify that if you're that one,
yes,
you can park it. So this is, I have read it because I know that one of the questions was that one. That is it.
Because you can't park at the front, can you? Because it's the
parking space which I have, which I have taken the picture also, with 3 cars parked very comfortably, and I send it to the either planning provision department or when one of the planning inspector came and visited us. I parked the cars. She saw the car. There are 3 comfortable on my driveway.
Yeah, but if you had visitors, where would they park?
Oh, we just have 2 cars. So if any visitor comes, they can park, you know, on that area. And if you look at that area all of the houses has got maximum 3 parking spaces, you know, available. Let's say if any visitor come, because the visitor come for short time, they don't come for longer time. If you can look at the maps and everything, just behind my parking space, you can park another 3 cars for short term, for 2 hours, 3 hours,
Right.
4 hours.
I think we've probably got the answer to the question. But thank you for the detailed explanation. Any more points?
No.
No. Okay. So thank you. And so we'll go over to committee now for discussion and decision. So does anyone wish to ask any questions, make any points? Councillor Bailey?
Could we clarify the total number of bedrooms? I do note that on one of the comments, on comment E on page 84, it says the resultant 7-bedroom property. Is that actually correct? I haven't counted that many bedrooms. I know there's 4, I believe, upstairs. Is it 2 downstairs or more?
We'll check that. But sometimes, I mean, that's a comment from a neighbour.
This is why I was asking just how many there are in total, please.
Do we have an answer to that?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so on the proposed plans on the screen before you, you can see that there are actually 5 bedrooms labelled upstairs. On the ground floor, the layout includes a playroom and a study, and I believe in some of the neighbour comments they've suggested that they could potentially be used as bedrooms. Clearly, that's not what they're labelled for, and the applicant is not intended to use for that purpose. But the plans just show 5 bedrooms on the upstairs.
So it's 4 upstairs and 1 downstairs. Councillor Upton.
Thank you. I like the design. There's very little I have that I don't like about it. My only concern is, and I think it was something along the lines, the rear elevation, the 4 gables adds interest. It certainly adds interest, but I'm not sure that I think it's in a positive way personally. Did it say that that could be viewed from Rufford Road or something, Rufford Drive? So you could see these 4 gables on the rear from the public domain. I'm probably minded to vote for it, frankly, but I would sort of suggest to the applicant, perhaps there is another way you could deal with those 4 gables. It just jars with me from a professional design point of view. But broadly, I like it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Upton. Probably no need to come back on that because that's just your observation. Right. Any other comments, queries, questions? So, Councillor Mason.
No, I was just going to propose the recommendation to accept.
So basically, you're moving.
I was looking for somebody else because I seem to.
Yeah. So basically, you're moving the recommendation as per the report, and Councillor Upton, you're seconding it. Righty ho. I don't think we have any other speakers on this. We've had a lot of detail on the application. We've had some questions asked and answered, and we've had some observations made. So let's make a decision. With a show of hands, those in favour of the application, please show. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Anyone against? 1, 2, 3. So that's, and for the record, no abstentions. 7 in favour, 3 against. So permission is granted. Okay, thank you very much. And we'll go on to our final application. And we've just got a slight delay now because the officer for who's dealing with this next application is upstairs and is on the way downstairs as I speak. Okay, so we'll go on to our final application, which is an interesting one. It's the former Islamic Institute in Flinton, and it's the construction of a bat barn. So if you would talk us through this, that would be great. So over to you. Thank you, Mrs. Dunn.
Thank you, Chairman. So we're out at Flinton. The application site's located outside of the village of Flinton. It's occupied by a number of buildings which are in a vacant and derelict state. The site previously had the benefit of outline planning permission for demolition and redevelopment for residential development, which has now expired. Full planning permission is now sought for the erection of a bat barn to provide compensatory accommodation for bats presently roosting in the current buildings on the site, which require demolition. The application is in front of the committee as the council is the applicant. It is important to note that the application is purely for the proposed erection of the back barn and does not consider the matters around the demolition of the existing buildings on the site or any future development. As we can see from the aerial photograph, the site is located to the northwest of the village of Flintham, with the A46 forming the boundary to the west and a cricket ground with pavilion to the south. The red line shows access into the site, with the back barn proposed in front of a group of buildings of pine trees, which are protected by a tree preservation order. It's basically at the end of the red line that you can see on the photo. We can also see the extent of current buildings on the site from that slide. So moving on to a few photographs of the surrounding area. The photo shows the cricket pitch to the south of the site, with the trees in the background identifying the application site. The properties to the right-hand side are the residential properties, forming the edge of the village. As we approach the site, the buildings are just visible above the roadside hedgerow. Access to the site is from the track shown in this photo. It's presently overgrown with temporary security fencing attempting to prevent access to the site. So this photo illustrates the state of some of the buildings on the site, and the Borough Council has been actively seeking their demolition, both to improve the visual amenity of the area and also to remove buildings attracting antisocial behaviour. This slide shows the route past the buildings and into an area of overgrown vegetation, approaching the site for the proposed siting of the structure. We've now arrived at the site chosen to site the back barn, just at the front of the pine trees shown in the picture. Those are the pine trees that are protected by a group preservation order. Due consideration has been given to the potential impact of the development on those trees. As mentioned earlier, the Borough Council has been seeking the demolition of the buildings on the site, and as part of the process to secure their removal, it was established through surveys that parts of the buildings were being used for bats. This is a site location plan, really just emphasising where the red line is the access to the building, and the back barn is shown as a block of red at the end of the access. So as bats are legally protected species, it is necessary to ensure that compensatory habitats are available to secure the long-term protection of the species should the buildings be demolished. In the absence of any current redevelopment proposals, an independent ecologist has recommended the erection of a bat barn, and the location of the bat barn is shown on this slide. Full planning permission is therefore sought for a structure having an internal measurement of 5 metres by 5 metres, with an overall height of 5.6 metres, and a required internal loft height of 2.8 metres. And the cross-section there on that photo shows the internal loft space. The committee can see that the building is functional in design and incorporates brick elevations, tiled roof, timber cladding to the gable ends, and the design of the building also incorporates features such as gaps for bats to enter and internal bat boxes. The report sets out the justifications for the building and the material planning considerations. The building design and location follows the advice of the independent ecologist, and it's cited to ensure that it's not intrusive in its setting and will not prejudice any longer-term development potential on the site. The Borough Council's landscape officer is satisfied that its location will not unduly impact on any trees covered by a tree preservation order, and tree protection measures are proposed to be secured by way of condition number 3. It is therefore recommended to committee that planning permission is granted subject to the conditions set out in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. We don't have any guest speakers on this, and you'll see from the report that the ward member, Councillor Bailey, supports it, as does the parish council. Does anyone have any comments or questions to make about this? Or would somebody like to propose it? Councillor Adair, are you moving the recommendation? Do we have a seconder for that, please? Thank you, Councillor Way. Does anyone want to say anything on this, or shall we just go to the vote? We'll go to, I mean, it's fascinating, a fascinating application. Yes, so let's have a show of hands. All those in favour, please show. No, for the record, no one against. That's unanimous. Thank you. That's the final application for today. There's one more item on the agenda, which is just for noting, and you'll see that there's a report of recent appeals. We used to do this at this committee until quite a while ago, but because there's been such pressure of business and all the rest of it, we haven't done it for a while. But for anyone who is interested, there's a list here of planning appeals and whether they've been successful or not, depending on your point of view. So it's just a little bit of light reading for you. But it does make interesting reading, because it does give you some examples as to perhaps, for example, like we've had today, where we've had a committee has perhaps made a decision contrary to a recommendation, and it shows in an appeal situation what an inspector may or may not discuss. But anyway, it's just some information. So that's that, and there's no other items on the agenda. So can I thank you for your patience and your timely contributions. Also, especially on one of the applications in particular, we did have a little bit of technical issues with the illustrations, but I think everyone understood the situation. So with that, we'll close the meeting at 4:52. So